Hi guys, and welcome to another 7-minute lecture. The ethics of Thomas Aquinas. That's what I want to touch on today. It's a bit of a quirky topic, I get it, but I haven't done anything religion related in a long time, so I thought I might as well throw this in. Thomas Aquinas was an Italian priest and philosopher who lived in the mid 13th century and is still one of the most important figures in Christian theology. You can look at ethics, metaphysics, political theory. Many of the major schools of thought we have in modern Western philosophy owe some debt of origin to him. In many ways, he brought Greek philosophy into the worldview of the Catholic Church, and this then developed into a body of work that remains relevant to this day. As you can probably tell from the title, we aren't looking at his entire legacy today. We only have 7 minutes after all. We are looking instead at the contributions he made to ethics, which in turn is one of Christianity's biggest contributions to ethics as a field of study. What I'm talking about, of course, is Thomas Aquinas' just war theory, something which even modern scholars get PhDs on to this day. The just war theory was one of the first attempts in the Christian world to develop an ethical framework for violence, and even more importantly, for large-scale violence like war. Even though ideologies like Hinduism and Buddhism has all of that thousands of years earlier than that, as far as the Judeo-Christian tradition goes, this is one of the foundational theories. And Thomas Aquinas spent a big part of his life pondering questions like this. Is it okay for us to go to war? If we do go to war, can we do whatever we want, or are we bound by limits? He was always looking at big picture conceptual questions like this. The just war theory was originally developed by Augustine of Hippo, which was then developed by Thomas Aquinas, which was then developed and spread all over the world by future theologians, many of whom were part of the Spanish Renaissance of theology, which is today known as the School of Salamanca. So just war theory, guys, is basically this. It's simple. It's a two-part theory. The first is that you must have just, moral, ethical reasons for going to war. The second is that once you've engaged in this ethical war or just war, your conduct in this war needs to be just as well. The way you act needs to be ethical as well. So that's about it. And as you can see, it's an early prototype of modern day laws of war. It's the theory that sets the foundation for the present day. So let's look at them individually. The first part is called jus ad bellum. It simply means the right to go to war, or the just conditions under which you can go to war. And here there are a few reasons given to us as legitimate reasons for which good Christians can go to war. The first is that there has to be a just cause. I think this is obvious. We don't need to bother too much with that. Another is comparative justice. So one side must be suffering far more injustice than the other. If that happens, you can intervene in favor of the one suffering more, since there's clearly a sort of victim-oppressor dichotomy. A few recent scholars have also added high probability of success as a requirement for something to qualify under the just war idea. That if it's a mission destined for failure, if it's just an expression of violence for an objective that can never actually be achieved, then it would not qualify as a just cause for war. After that, it can also be done when you have the right intention, according to just war theory. Of course, this is subjective and can't really be proven in court, but we're talking about theology here, not law. So Aquinas said you must have the right intention. Your motive should be that you were trying to help people. And finally, just wars are sort of legitimate when war is the last resort. It can't be something you're diving into without having expended all the other options. There's a lot more I can list, but these are the main ones. For the purposes of Christian ethics, Christian warfare ethics, these are all the primary requirements which makes it acceptable for you to go to war. When there's injustice, you have the right intention, one side is suffering more, there's some kind of just reason behind the war, blah, blah, blah. The second part of the theory is conduct in war, jus in bello. So the thing you have to do or not do to be the good guy, That's what jus in bello is. And I think I've already covered this part in some of my previous videos where I ran through the laws of war, the three pillars of warfare essentially: distinction, proportionality, necessity. I won't spend too much time. Distinction as in you have to distinguish between a combatant and a non-combatant before you use force. Proportionality as in your use of force must be proportionate to whatever objective you're trying to gain by using that force. And number three, necessity, as in it should be necessary for you to have used that force. There are other sort of requirements that modern scholars add as well for something to be kind of legitimized by the just war theory. You need to treat prisoners of war in a humane manner. That's one. And number two, you cannot use methods that are considered evil. That's a subjective term once again, but it means things like you can't commit mass rape, you can't force enemy soldiers to fight each other, you can't use overly destructive weapons and stuff like that. So these are the two things that make up the Christian understanding of morality in armed conflict. In closing, what I find interesting about these things is how morality around violence is a theme that is ever changing. Violence is something that most of us are against, and yet it's one of those things where our social views on it always seem to be changing. Large scale violence in the context of armed conflict is even more problematic because often prosperous societies happen to be the benefactors of war, and therefore all kinds of convoluted moral justifications have to kind of be made to come to grips with the necessity of war. Somewhere down the line, I will do similar videos where I look at Hindu philosophers or Buddhist or Muslim philosophers and talk about how they view violence or what they consider to be just and fair use of organized violence, because that will certainly add a great deal to our overall picture on this. If you like content like this, please don't forget to share and subscribe. Thank you, take care, and I'll see you soon.